Hi, I'm Chloe and welcome to my studio. I'm a metalsmith and I've been a metalsmith for about 2 years now. I started in January of 2023, and so I wanted to show you all of the basic tools and supplies that I bought in order to start my own first studio, to see if it could help you start your own studio. I do want to preface this video by saying that everyone is different. I probably started with like a medium amount of tools. You could definitely go lighter than I did, or you could go heavier than I did. I started in the medium side because I had already taken a couple of weeks of a class, and so I knew I was really interested in this craft, but this craft is very expensive. So just to preface with all of that, you should start your studio however you want to start it. There's a million different ways to metalsmith and a million different tools you can use to accomplish the same thing. So just because what I bought was right for me doesn't mean that that has to be right for you. But yeah, let me show you what I got. Okay, so first and foremost, I do think these are necessities to start with the basic safety supplies. So everything that I bought here is from Amazon, and I started with these safety glasses, of course. Very stylish. I have Sunspot 2 pairs that I like a little bit more than this. They're just a little bit less bulky, but these were great. They have the side shields, and they're just like very great for protecting your eyes, which is extremely important, especially when you're working with fire or with all the different dust types that come from metalsmithing. And then the other thing that I bought was this respirator, which also comes with these cartridges, and you do need to clean and you need to clean your respirator, and then you also need to replace the cartridges. Mine is absolutely due for a cleaning. You can see there's dust on the nose and kind of all over it, so I should replace my cartridges and do my cleaning. But this is important for soldering, especially if you don't have good ventilation in your studio space or wherever you're working. Next, to go into some of the soldering tools and supplies that I use and that I bought when I first started my studio. So I actually don't still have the soldering block that I started with. I did start with a honeycomb soldering block, and then there's something you buy underneath it that's like a heat shield so that you're not going to ruin the surface that you're working on. But then I moved to this guy. I really like it because it rotates, but it is a little bit more expensive, so I didn't start with this one. I started with a honeycomb soldering block. I just don't have it here to show you anymore because those break down over time and you need to replace them. I also, of course, got a fire source. So for me, I got this little butane, well, it's actually not little. This is a Big Shot butane torch, Big Shot Blazer GT8000, and it is very, very powerful. I would also recommend having a smaller butane torch. This one can like melt jump rings and everything very, very quickly if you don't know how to control it. I did have a smaller butane torch at one point, but it broke, so I don't have that here to show you either, but this is what I primarily use for soldering, and it's really easy. You just like turn the nozzle and got a little fire. So I would highly recommend this for beginners. When I was a beginner, I did consider getting a full torch setup, but those are pretty expensive, so it's great to start with the butane torches, and then if you're really sticking with the hobby, you can move on to like a Smith Little torch or a bigger torch that has like a gas tank setup. And then of course, to go with the butane torch, I also bought 6 of these refillable little butane canisters. Okay, and then for soldering, I also bought these little third hand guys. It did come with 2 others, and as you can see, I've used them quite a bit over the years. It's pretty dirty and messy, but they're great because you can just kind of like move them all around to hold your pieces in different locations. So I use these a lot for when I'm trying to get a tricky jump ring solder on, or when I'm trying to hold 2 pieces together. So something else that you do a lot in metalsmithing is cutting and sawing, and probably one of the more important pieces here, of course, is a saw, but I'm going to start with this. So this is the bench pin that I got. You just twist it onto your bench and you can more easily cut things with this like V that it has right here. And then if you're cutting smaller pieces, it has these nice little cutouts right here. You can make your own bench pin too. A lot of people do that just out of a block of wood or whatever you have available. So that's definitely an option as well. But this was what I got. This is the saw that I bought. I don't know if you can see this, but it is very, very rusty. I did actually replace this saw. So I have a better saw now. This one was just like a little like clunky and like harder for me to use. But it's a great beginner saw, and it doesn't cost too much. So it's great to start with, and you can adjust the frame to be bigger or smaller that way. So that is great. So a saw for sawing out your little pieces. And then I would also recommend getting some assorted saw blades. So I did buy this guy that has all these little assorted saw blades. They're really cheap saw blades from Amazon. I personally would recommend starting with cheap saw blades because when you're sawing and learning to saw, you're gonna break a lot of saw blades. So I broke a lot of the cheaper ones, but then it was great because when I bought the more expensive saw blades from Rio or from Pepe Tools, it was nice because I didn't break as many and it was so much smoother once you move over to those. So I guess there could be two schools of thought. It's a little bit easier to saw with those more expensive saw blades, so you could start with those. But however you want to do it, I started with these cheaper ones and it was a great start for me. Another investment that I would highly recommend getting are these Joyce Chen scissors. You can actually use them to cut out some back plates if they are a thinner gauge. So I think I've noticed that like 21 to like 22-ish gauge silver or thinner, I can actually use the scissors to cut out the back plates instead of sawing them out, which just saves a ton of time and is amazing. They're also great for just like cutting different lengths of wire, cutting your bezels, all of that. So I had seen, I don't recall who it was, but I had seen another metalsmith give the tip to buy these scissors, and I would highly recommend buying them when you first start your studio. And then after you saw, you also will need to file. So I bought this little teeny tiny filing set to start. It has all the different shapes of files. So it has like the half round and the flat ones and then the round ones. These are pretty tiny. You could definitely get some bigger files. I think personally, I didn't want to splurge on like really expensive files when I was just starting to metalsmith, so I did enjoy starting with these. But I think that it also could be beneficial to get like a bigger set than this since these are very tiny. One other thing you will need to help you with your sawing is some saw lube. So you just need something to grease your saw with so that it doesn't get stuck on the silver. I've seen some people that use olive oil. This comes with a lot of saws. If you buy a saw, oftentimes this will come with either like a saw or a saw blade, and then it lasts forever. Like I've had this for 2 years and I have like barely used, you can't really see, but I barely used any of it. So I love this stuff, and it just makes it so that your saw blade doesn't stick, and it kind of extends the life of your saw blade, because if your saw blade starts sticking, then that's when you're going to break it. And then one other thing you're going to need for soldering is some kind of flux. So I bought this Fire Scoff flux. I do really like it because you just spray it on, but you do need to use a lot more than if you bought some of the flux that is thicker and like comes in a jar. I've tried both kinds. I personally just really like this one because it's really easy to apply, but I do like the thicker one that comes in a jar for certain types of soldering jobs because it helps your solder stick to your soldering pick. So you can pick and choose whichever one works best for you. I would recommend trying them both and just seeing what works best for you. You are also going to need or probably want a rawhide mallet. So I use this. I actually haven't really like properly broken it in yet, to be honest with you. But I use this quite a bit when my silver bends a little bit. So maybe if I'm sawing and it like bends a little bit out of shape, you can just like hammer it back into place, and the rawhide mallet is soft enough so that it's not going to majorly like scratch or mar your metal, and it's also not going to dent it, which a harder hammer would do. So you use this to bend your metal back into place, and I would recommend getting one. And then I also got this beadsmith hammer and this little block to hammer onto, so use this for stamping. I use this a ton. I do a lot of like stamped lines in my pieces. I also do some pieces where maybe I start with round wire and then I like hammer the wire flat. So you can just use, you can get like lots of different textures if you use this side versus using this side. And it's really great for, yeah, adding textures, adding a stamp, all those types of things. One other thing, if you want to make rings in your studio, I would recommend getting a ring sizer mandrel. So I have this guy. It has all the different size rings on it. So this one goes from 1 up until 18, and it has marks on it for half sizes and quarter sizes. And all you have to do is you take that and say you want to make a size 6. You just identify where the size 6 is, and then you can bend your ring band to size to get it on there. And then for finishing pieces, so I would highly recommend a flex shaft or some kind of rotary tool. You do not, when you're just starting out, you do not have to splurge on like the Fordham flex shaft or anything. Those are very, very expensive. And if you don't know how much you're going to be doing the craft or how long you're going to be doing the craft, you can find some cheaper ones. It's kind of a different philosophy of like buy once, cry once type of deal, but personally, when I was starting out, I just did not have $500 to spend on a Fordham flex shaft. It is on my wish list. Now that I've been doing this craft for about 2 years, I would like to upgrade. But I went to Harbor Freight, and Harbor Freight actually had a $50 flex shaft, and it is still going strong for me. So I would highly recommend getting, you can also use a Dremel or some kind of flex shaft to help you with your polishing and finishing work. You can do this by hand if you're trying to go really minimal in your first studio setup, but it will just take you a lot longer and be more of a pain in the butt. So it depends how dedicated you are if you want to do it by hand versus if you want to try to get some sort of rotary tool. I also, you do not need this, but I did get a tumbler. This one, I don't think it was too pricey, but the tumbler, and then you also need to get the tumbling medium, so that's this stuff that's shaken around inside here. So what this does is it helps you finish your pieces a little bit easier, especially when you're first starting off. I think it really kind of like leveled up my pieces when I didn't know how to like sand or file or polish as well as I did before. It's not going to fix everything. Like if there's scratches in your pieces, the scratches are still going to be there when it's come out of the tumbler. But I think just like when you're first starting out, it can be really helpful to get your pieces just like a little bit shinier than you'll be able to get with your rotary tool and your beginner skills. And then one more thing, I think this is the last thing. When I was first starting out, I bought these Dedico Sunburst 4-ply disc assist. They come with 7 different colors and they're for polishing. So you start with the yellow one and then you work your way all the way up to the green one with each of your pieces. And this was really, really helpful when I first started for polishing before I had like a full polishing wheel set up. So yeah, I think that is everything. When I first started my studio, I have a lot more things now, and you kind of like get a feel for what you really like and what you really don't like when you started. I've definitely bought things when I first started that I don't use anymore, and I've also bought things when I first started that I use all the time now. So I would recommend watching a few different YouTube videos or finding a few different lists of what people recommend you need when you first start your studio, and really just like comparing and contrasting what you think you would work best with and what would work best for you and your type of like work that you'd like to make, and just kind of like make a list and then like place an order and see how it goes, work with it for a couple of weeks, start from there, and then you can add up more things as you go. So that's what I did. I placed one big order and then I kind of put a pause on it until I tried everything out, and then I like built my studio up from there over the last 2 years. Like I said, I've definitely been reaching the point where I've been switching out some of my tools, some of my beginner tools, for things that are more like name brand or like a little bit, maybe have like a better functionality. So I think it's something you can start with like a beginner to medium size like studio setup and just, yeah, work your way up from there. So anyway, thanks for joining me today, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments.